Saturday morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you are here for the SR-39 reopening public hearing, then you have come to the absolute right place. My name is Rebecca Barantes with the Sierra Group, and I am your moderator for this morning's meeting, assisting Caltrans District 7's Environmental Affairs Department. I'm going to give people a little bit more time to join the meeting before we start with some tips on how to participate in this morning's meeting, especially for our Spanish-speaking attendees. So right now we have approximately 22 people in the room and more are joining. So just sit back, relax, maybe get a refill on that morning beverage of yours, and I will be right back. Okay, welcome back. Thanks for joining all of those who were just coming in now. We are now at 24 attendees. So what we're going to do is get started with a little bit of history of how we got here. A little over a year ago, we held a scoping meeting where we introduced the project to you. And since then, the project team has refined the project design and conducted their environmental review. And now that's what we're here to present this morning, the results of that review. This is the public hearing for the draft environmental impact report, environmental assessment for the SR-39 reopening project. This is the next step in the environmental process and one of many opportunities that the public will have to be informed and give input on this very important project. So before we get started, we want everyone to know they can participate in English and in Spanish. And I'm going to have my colleague, Alexandra Ortiz, explain how to listen and participate in Spanish. Alexandra?
Gracias, Rebeca. Bienvenidos a todos. Gracias a todos por acompañarnos esta mañana. Estamos muy agradecidos por su tiempo y valoramos su participación. Esta mañana escucharán una presentación y lo más importante es que podrán darnos su opinión. Pueden escuchar la presentación y participar de este encuentro virtual en español. Busquen en la parte de abajo de su pantalla el símbolo de un globo del mundo. El globo dice interpretación. Y podrá escuchar a la intérprete de español, Gabriela Tavili, y ver las diapositivas de la presentación. Si desea hablar, por favor, haga clic en el botón levantar la mano. Cuando haga esto, Rebeca verá su mano levantada y le activará el sonido para que pueda hablar. Cuando sea su turno, Rebeca lo llamará por su nombre. Por favor, indique su nombre y apellido para el registro. Y si prefiere escribir un comentario, haga clic en chat y escriba su comentario. La señora Gabriela Tavili, nuestra intérprete, y yo traduciremos la presentación y los comentarios para todos. Le daremos a cada participante 3 minutos para hablar y usaremos un reloj que usted podrá ver en la pantalla. Le recomendamos que comparta sus comentarios, escuche y hable con respeto. Esta reunión está siendo grabada. Back to you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. All right, so now for everybody else who would like to know how they can participate in today's public hearing, we really thank you for being here, first of all. And we do have quite a number of attendees now. And there may be some people who already want to speak. And I've seen in the chat that we have at least one person who indicates they want to speak. So let me tell you how to do that. All comments are going to be translated in English and Spanish. And your comments are welcome by using the raise your hand feature to speak. And as Alexandra said in Spanish, we will see your hand raised and we will call on you. And we want you to start by saying your first and last name and giving us your comments. And now today we want only comments because that is the primary purpose of today's meeting. So when the public comment period starts, if you do want to speak, we want you to use that raise your hand button. And when you do that, again, I will see your hand raised and I will unmute you so you can speak when it's your turn. And I will call you by whatever name you have on screen. You will be allowed 3 minutes to speak, and I will be putting up a timer on the screen. So please, again, start your comment with your first and last name before you speak, because it's mandatory so we know who is commenting for the record. If you do not want to speak, then you'd rather write your comments. You can use the chat button at the bottom of your screen and write your comment. We just ask that you put your first and last name in there so we know who is commenting, again, for the record. And last but not least, if you want to submit comments after the public hearing, you still may do so. You'll be given the information on how to do that later in the presentation, and we will post it to the chat during the meeting, so you'll have that information. You will be able to submit public comments all the way until May 11th, 2024. That's May 11th, 2024. All right, so let's see how many attendees we have now. We have 27, and I don't see any raised hands yet, but that doesn't mean that we won't have speakers, because you probably need to hear a little bit more about this project and about about what's being proposed before you have something to say. So that's okay. All right, good. Oh, I see some hands raised now. Fantastic. That's amazing. Again, just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and transcribed. So please, when you speak, speak clearly. And always, 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 we encourage you to speak and listen respectfully for yourself and others. Okay, that about does it for me right now. I'd like to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Carl Price, Senior Environmental Scientist with Caltrans District 7. Carl?
Okay, thank you, Rebecca. And good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us here on this pre-Earth Day Saturday. I'm going to go over basically the purpose of the meeting today. As Rebecca sort of hinted at, we're here to provide you with a summary of the draft environmental document, environmental impact report, environmental assessment that's been prepared for this project. We're going to describe the process that will be used to identify a preferred alternative, provide a summary of the next steps that we're going to be going through as we move forward in the process. And most importantly, we will be listening to your comments. All of your comments will be incorporated into the public record, and we will provide responses to those comments in the final environmental document. A little bit of history about the project. Yes, as most of you probably know, State Route 39 is a winding, narrow 2-lane road. It traverses rugged terrain and connects the San Gabriel Valley to State Route 2 in the San Gabriel Mountains. It provides access to the Angeles National Forest for hiking, camping, and a variety of other recreational activities. The last 4.4 miles, though, have been closed for many years due to rock slides. But before that closure, State Route 39 provided another route to access the mountain community of Wrightwood and also the cities in the high desert. So the last 4.4 mile section has been closed since 1978 because of unstable slopes both above and below the roadway. This is the area from north of Crystal Lake Road up to State Route 2. Frequent rock slides that send rock and dirt down onto the road, and that makes the roadway unsafe for people to use. Since 1990, Caltrans maintenance crews have been maintaining this section by clearing debris and making repairs, but just doing enough to keep the road open for Forest Service and emergency personnel, such as Sheriff's Department, Fire Departments, and others. And we have been through this process before. There have been previous efforts to reopen this section. In 2009, an environmental document was prepared and a project approved to reopen this segment by implementing major construction work to stabilize the damaged roadway segments. The first phase of that project restored 5 sections of the collapsed roadway, and that effort was completed back in 2011. But a combination of factors came about that caused us to basically cancel the project from that point forward. There were escalating construction costs and fiscal constraints, the geologic instability of the slopes, and then also the fully protected status of the Nelson's bighorn sheep. Those things all came together, and because of that, the preferred alternative that had been selected and approved in 2009 was deemed to no longer be viable. So in May 2012, Caltrans terminated that previously chosen alternative and selected the no-build option. So for this effort, we have a schedule that's been put together for this effort because Caltrans and others still believe there's value in reopening the road. And so we initiated this project a few years back. What you see on the screen is sort of the big picture schedule for the project as we go through the environmental process. We started PAED, that's project approval environmental document phase, back in fall of 2020. We anticipate completing this phase in the winter of 24, early 25. We'll go into our final design phase and complete that in the fall of 2029. Construction is likely to begin in summer of 2030, and then construction is anticipated to be completed in the spring of 2033. And now we have I guess you'd call it a smaller picture of the environmental process, where we are at right now. So back in December of 2022, we entered the scoping process. We held a scoping meeting, collected people's comments on the alternatives that had been proposed at that time. Since then, we've been conducting our environmental studies, identifying impacts and screening out alternatives. We've prepared the draft environmental document, and that's where we are today, with the draft document out for public circulation. We're currently accepting comments from the public for this document. And after the comment period closes, then we will evaluate the comments we receive, evaluate the information we have available, and identify a preferred alternative. And then that alternative will be identified in the final environmental document, which we anticipate in the fall of this year. Okay, so it occurred to the project team that most people have never been up to this closed section of roadway since it has been closed for so many years. So we put together a brief video that will give you a feel for what the environment is like up there, and what some of the conditions that we're facing are in that area for this project. So we have a brief video for you right now. You can see that it's very steep slopes, very rugged terrain, rock fall and debris falling down on the roadway. And as I mentioned, our Caltrans maintenance crews go up there periodically to clear the road, to keep it open for emergency access. And you can see some of the damage that's been done by rock slides or just collapsing of the slope there. In some places, the roadway is very narrow, very difficult to maneuver by vehicles. And this is the area closest to State Route 2 on the northern terminus. And again, you can see the slopes have what look like a lot of loose debris that has fallen over the years. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the project purpose and need. The purpose and need is really the driving force behind this project or behind any project. The need identifies the problem or the problems that we're trying to solve, and the purpose identifies the goals or the objectives to resolve those problems. So we'll start with the project purpose. The first one we have identified is that we want to restore access between Interstate 210 and State Route 2. We want to enhance access for fire suppression forces, search and rescue, and emergency response personnel. We want to improve the multimodal access in accordance with Caltrans Complete Streets policies. And we want to reduce vehicle congestion, address parking capacity issues, and improve public safety. Now, the project need on the next slide has been identified as, the current conditions of the roadway continue to degrade, and they pose a safety hazard to our Caltrans maintenance crews and other people who utilize the roadway. There's a need to provide an alternate, more direct route for motorists driving between the San Gabriel Valley and Wrightwood or communities up in the high desert. Compliance with Caltrans, with the California Streets and Highways Code, by maintaining the state highway, by identifying and closing gaps in the highway system, and identifying and addressing safety and long-term maintenance issues. There's a need to assist in satisfying the goals and policies outlined in the Angeles Forest Land Management Plan in terms of providing access to recreational opportunities. And there's a need to provide enhanced access for emergency personnel, such as the Sheriff's Department, search and rescue, fire departments, and so on. So, when we started this project, we had a total of 6 alternatives that were being considered, no build, and then 5 various build alternatives. Over the course of our analysis up to this point, we've determined that 2 of those alternatives are not really viable. The alternative 5, the viaduct alternative, we determined that the excessively high cost and because of the excessively high cost, it just wasn't really feasible. And plus the need for that alternative was sort of diminished because of a change in the status of the bighorn sheep. And I'll discuss that a little bit more later. The single lane alternative, that was eliminated because the cost savings that we had expected just weren't there. And more importantly, there were some safety concerns that we were not able to resolve. And so the viaduct alternative and the single travel lane alternatives have been what we call considered but rejected. And so that leaves us with alternatives 2, 3, and 4, along with the no build. 2, 3, and 4, they have successively more development and provide successively more access to this closed section. And we'll go through those right now. So alternative 1, that's the no build alternative. It would maintain the roadway in its existing conditions. There'd be no improvements made. Caltrans would continue to do our minimal maintenance that we currently do. But again, that's just enough to keep the road open for emergency personnel. Alternative 2 is the evacuation route. And this proposes rehabilitation of the pavement and maintaining the closed segment as an evacuation route. It proposes limited roadway restoration. The road will continue to be closed to the public highway traffic, and access would be strictly limited to emergency personnel and our Caltrans maintenance people. The construction components of this alternative include reconstructing the pavement with new asphalt, restoring drainage systems, removing debris from the roadside, repairing or constructing soldier pile walls to stabilize failed pavement sections, and then adding guardrail upgrades. So it's basically improving the road just enough to make it more safe for emergency access. Alternative 3, we're calling that the active transportation access alternative. This would include the roadway improvements that I mentioned previously for alternative 2, but would also include sustainable parking areas at the beginning and the end of the closed section. There would be 3 major viaduct structures to remove or to pull the roadway away from the most severe debris slide areas. There would be a rock shed that would also protect the roadway from falling debris. There will be 5 soldier pile retaining walls, and then we would do rock scaling at 10 locations along the 4.4 mile segment. And rock scaling is just a process where crews go up on the slope. You can kind of see that in one of these photos here. They go up on the slope and remove any loose rock or rock that our geologists feel has the potential to fall down onto the roadway. This alternative would also include an on-site shuttle service that will be operated by trained drivers to carry people in and out of the area. Shuttle speeds will be limited to 15 miles per hour, and the drivers would have to use extreme caution near wildlife crossing areas that will be marked and signed. And the idea behind this is to make the road safe enough for people to enjoy the outdoor activities in the area, such as hiking, biking, picnicking, camping, etc. Emergency and maintenance vehicles would still have access. So alternative 4 is the full opening, and this proposes rehabilitation and reopening of the roadway, construction of bridges, a rock shed, and installation of wildlife fencing. It will provide unrestricted access to through traffic between Interstate 210 and State Route 2. And the proposed construction elements are the same as what I just mentioned in alternative 3, except there will be no parking lots at the 2 termini of the segment. Instead, we would install a roundabout at the junction of State Route 39 and State Route 2. There would also be construction of 2 additional viaducts that would facilitate wildlife crossing underneath the highway, and installation of a continuous barrier fencing that would restrict bighorn sheep from accessing the roadway. So, each of the build alternatives is unique, but as I'm sure you noticed, they do have some elements in common. These do include roadway rehabilitation, roadway striping, removal of rocks and debris, drainage system repair, and retaining walls. And then on the next slide, we can see the locations of the viaducts that are proposed for alternatives 3 and 4. And again, these viaducts would allow for debris to slide downhill underneath the roadway without damaging the road. Would provide safer access and safer passage for people and wildlife. The graphic on the right illustrates the areas where the wildlife crossings would likely occur and the viaducts. On the left side of the roadway, you can see there are 3 wildlife crossings and 3 viaducts that are used as wildlife crossings as well. And then on the right, there are 5 wildlife crossings / viaducts. And then on the left, there's that photo is just a generic viaduct from another project. So, all right, so let's get into a little bit more detail about how we looked at the issues on this project. We evaluated a wide range of environmental resource issues for this project, prepared technical studies. The results of those studies are summarized in the draft environmental documents. Most of these resource areas, we determined they would not be affected or would only receive minimal effects from this project. But there are a few topics that we feel are worth pointing out. So, these are the areas that we did identify some impacts on or differences in impacts between the various alternatives. So I'm going to go through these briefly. Okay, we'll start with emergency services. As I mentioned earlier, improving the ability of emergency response personnel to get up and down the road is a key element behind the need for this project. And as you might expect, the different degrees of opening that the alternatives provide leads to different degrees of success in meeting that need. So alternatives 2 and 3, they would improve the road, but the gates would still remain closed. So obviously that would slow access for emergency crews or emergency personnel getting through there. For alternative 4, the roadway would be open, no gates, unrestricted access for emergency personnel. And then, as far as transportation and traffic goes, closing the gap in the roadway network and providing an alternate route into the mountains and beyond, that's another driving need for this project. Alternative 3 would partially satisfy that need because it would provide access to pedestrians and bicyclists and public transportation. Alternative 4 would fully satisfy it, obviously, because there will be no restrictions on access for that alternative. Now, obviously, recreation is a big issue in the mountains. It is a national forest after all. So I wanted to go through a little bit of the results of our studies on that. But first, I'm going to describe what Section 4 is all about. It refers to a section of the U.S. Department of Transportation Act of 1966. And it basically provides protection for public parks, recreation areas, wildlife refuges, and historic sites. Although it does not specifically protect national forests, it does offer protection to the types of facilities that I just mentioned that are located within the forest. So it's a key area of analysis that we did for this project. The map on the right here shows the recreational and historic resources that are located within the general vicinity of our project. Not all of these qualify as Section 4F resources. Most of them either do not meet the definition of a 4F resource or they're too far from the project to be affected. The resources that are close enough to be affected are listed here on the slide. The first one is the Islip Saddle day use area. Alternatives 3 and 4 would result in minor impacts to this area. For alternative 3, part of it would be used as a northern parking lot for the shuttle service. And then there would also be some limited public access during construction, but that would be temporary. For alternative 4, the roundabout would encroach into this site. However, we would reconfigure the parking so that there would be no loss of parking in this area. There would also be some construction effects where we would have to limit public access during construction. As a 4F resource, and the Forest Service has a key say in what we can and cannot do on their property, and so we would definitely need to be consulting with the U.S. Forest Service and getting their buy-in on any alternative that affected their resource. So we will be doing if one of these alternatives is selected, we would be consulting with them. So Crystal Lake, let's go back. There you go. Yeah, Crystal Lake recreation area, we determined there would be no impact, primarily due to the distance from the project. Portions of the Mount Islip and Big Cienega trails, the Jarvie Memorial Vista, and then the French Wall that is along a portion of this closed section, those also would receive no impact. I wanted to mention the Pacific Coast Trail, which even though it's not a 4F resource, it's obviously an important recreational resource. There would be no direct impacts to the trail from this project. But during construction, we would need to detour hikers away from the trail for safety reasons. As it, in the area closest to SR2. So alternatives 3 and 4 would have some temporary construction impacts, but those are considered minor. Okay, so biological resources, we did look at a wide range of resource areas for biology and natural resources. Most of these we determined would have minimal or no impacts. So on the next slide, you can see that we would have, no impacts to wildlife movement. There are no known wildlife movement corridors in the project area. Drainages, there are 10 drainages that cross this closed section of road. Most of them only run during rains or snow melt periods. I think only the Snow Spring slide area has a perennial drainage. The impacts of these drainages would be minimal for alternatives 2, 3, and 4. And you can see the impact areas here. And of course, we would be consulting with Army Corps of Engineers and California Department of Fish and Wildlife on getting permits for any impacts that we did have on these resources. But as you can see, the areas of impact are very small. Threatened and endangered species, we did not find any in the project area during our surveys. Also, there should be no impacts resulting from invasive species. During construction, we'll have measures in place to prevent invasive species from being introduced into the area. Now, there are a few listed species that we know are in the general vicinity of the project area, including leaf spells vireo, southwestern willow flycatcher, southern mountain yellow-legged frog, and some others. They, however, were not found during focused surveys of the project area, so we do not anticipate any impacts from those or to those. All right, so within the project area, there are 5 natural community types. Of these, 3 of them would have some impacts resulting from this project, but either permanent or temporary impacts. And as you can see from the table, the impact areas get progressively larger as you move from alternative 2 to 3 to 4. I think it's important to note that these impacts would occur in narrow strips or narrow bands adjacent to the existing roadway. The impacts are not considered significant, given the relatively small area and just the nature of the narrow bands that they would occur in. And the temporary impacts, we would be replanting those temporarily impacted areas. And so, so those areas would be replanted. Okay, the Nelson of the Big Orange Sheep. Now, this is one resource that everybody in the area seems to know about and is front and center in people's minds. It's not listed as a threatened or endangered species, but it does have received special attention from the Forest Service and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So coordination with these agencies is crucial to any project that might move forward. Whatever alternative we select, we will be coordinating with those agencies to make sure that we satisfy their needs. And we do know that bighorn sheep are in the project area. We've seen them walking on the closed section before, closed section of roadway. So we know we're there. We know they are there. And except under limited circumstances, the Fish and Game Code does not allow anyone to harm, kill, or injure any fully protected species. The status of this species, though, has changed recently. There was a Senate Bill 147 that was signed into law last year by the governor, and it amended California's fully protected species statuses. So currently, the laws and they refer to the bighorn sheep as a fully protected species, except for the Nelson subspecies. So, their status has changed, and we will be coordinating and continuing to coordinate with Forest Service and Cal Fish and Wildlife on regarding this species. We've designed the alternatives, and we'll continue to design them in a way that minimizes potential harm to the sheep. And with this change in status, right now we don't know exactly what kind of permitting mechanism might be required or used by California Fish and Wildlife. But we will be coordinating with them and with the Forest Service to make sure that whatever alternative is selected and in whatever manner we proceed in, that it's done in a way that minimizes harm to the sheep. Okay, so visual and aesthetic resources. Alternative 2 would result in minimal impact or little change to the existing features. Alternative 3, because of the introduction of the 3 viaducts and the rock shed, there would be some moderate visual impacts for that alternative. And alternative 4 would have 5 viaducts, the roundabout, and the exclusionary fencing and rock shed. So that would have a little bit additional impact, a little bit more impact. We will be coordinating with the Forest Service and utilizing aesthetic treatments wherever possible that will help these features blend in with the surrounding environment. So we anticipate being able to minimize the impacts of these features. And here's just some examples of some of these structures. There's the roundabout up on the upper left there, this rock shed on the upper right. That's from the Big Sur area, I believe. And the sort of a general viaduct from Colorado, from one of their highways there. And, again, we will be providing aesthetic treatments on these features and doing everything we can to help them blend in with their surroundings. And of course, we'll be working with the Forest Service to ensure that they're compatible with their aesthetic guidelines. Okay, so the next steps. Moving forward, we have this draft environmental document available for public review. It's on the Caltrans website. And we do encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, we encourage you to grab a copy of it, review it, at least those sections that are of interest to you, and utilize that, and as well as this the information from this meeting to provide your comments on the document and on the project. This meeting is being recorded, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, and it will shortly be posted on the Caltrans YouTube channel. Presentation material will also be posted on the Caltrans District 7 website. And, as Rebecca mentioned, the public comment period will extend until May 11th. So we do encourage you to provide comments between now and then. We anticipate having our environmental document in the fall of this year and then final project approval early next year. So, as we mentioned, we want to hear from you. This is your chance to tell us what you think about the project. What do you think about the alternatives? We do encourage you to provide comments on the document, on the alternatives, the mitigation measures that have been proposed. Anything in about this project that you want to comment on, please do so. If you have additional questions that you would like answered, we will respond to all comments and all questions in the final environmental document. And so again, May 11th is the deadline for submitting your comments. And you can do that, again, verbally here today, or in the chat in writing. You can mail comments to me at this address on the screen. And I believe that will be put in the chat as well. You can also email comments to this email address, and all of your comments will be collected and reviewed and addressed. We will provide responses to them in the final document. This is your chance to have your voice heard. So we do encourage you to do that. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca, and she will proceed with the public comment portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Carl. All right, so just to let everybody know where we are, we have 37 attendees, and at this moment, I see 3 hands raised. So let's go over how we're going to conduct our public comment period. First and foremost, all the Spanish and English comments are going to be translated for everyone to understand. All your comments are welcome. Again, you can raise your hand to speak, and I will call on you, or you can write your comments in the chat, and there will be a 3-minute timer that will go up when you start to speak. Always, we encourage you to speak and listen respectfully for yourself and others. And again, remind you that the meeting is being recorded and transcribed, so we want you to speak very clearly so we get your comments accurately. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead, and if you give me a couple of moments, and I will launch our timer. And then if you don't mind, a little bit of audience support here would be helpful. Let me know in the chat if you're seeing the timer. Okay, so do we see the timer?
Yes.
Yes, I'm getting some yeses. Yay. See the timer. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. This is when the chat feature really works well, doesn't it? Okay. All right. So let's go over it again. Right now I have about 5 people who raised their hand to speak. And so I'm going to call your name, the first person on our list. And I'm going to ask you to state your first and last name before you start your comments. And I'll start the timer, and we're going to go ahead and follow that same process for everybody. All right, so here we go. Our first speaker today is Jonathan Lewis, and I am requesting to unmute and allowing you to talk.
Hello.
Okay. We can hear you, I believe.
Okay, thank you. My name's Jonathan Lewis and I live in Wrightwood. And I see numerous problems with these proposals, but first of all, State Road 2. Yeah, I don't see the timer going, but okay, can you hear me?
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, State Road 2, Angeles Crest, is constantly closed. It's currently closed from Islip Saddle to Vincent Gulch. And so providing access to a road that is inaccessible seems quite foolish to me. I'd like to know what's been spent since the earlier revival project began in 2009 and ended in 2012, and what expenditures have been made in this current attempt. The recent document that was prepared in over 600 pages that I went through shows that there'll be little economic impact to Wrightwood because the 15 to the 138 is still a much faster and more reliable route to Wrightwood and to Mountain High. And I'm unfamiliar with what Caltrans complete streets policy is, but regardless of what it is, this is an extremely unnecessary and costly project. And if alternatives 3 or 4 are used and attempted, then it'll actually increase the number of emergency vehicles and emergency personnel needed because of the amount of accidents and injuries that will take place on that newly opened roadway. I'm a motorcyclist, and I can tell you right now that constantly there are people up here that aren't prepared for this territory and are injuring themselves or dying by misuse of the roadways. So it just seems to me an absolutely ludicrous attempt to supposedly provide greater access and supposedly provide a better existence for those of us up here and for people that don't live up here to access up here. But it's not going to do that. And we need it to be usable for emergency personnel. We don't need it to destroy what we currently have is a pretty good environment, and we need to protect the species that will be impacted by this. And it just seems to me that you need to take another look at this and then stop. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, our next speaker is John Monson. John, I'm unmuting and asking you to unmute and speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm on a kind of unstable unstable internet connection. So if my audio goes bad, tell me. I'm John Munson, M-O-N-S-E-N. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about the possible reopening of Highway 39. I'm speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club, the most enduring and respected grassroots environmental organization in the United States. I've lived in the San Gabriel Valley much of my life, and I know Highway 39 and the San Gabriel Valley canyons very well. The Sierra Club asks you to protect our forest high country by adopting Alternative 2, the minimum build, common sense public safety alternative. We ask you to reject option 3, which we call the shuttle to nowhere alternative, which requires extensive construction work and which puts wildlife at risk. And we ask Caltrans to reject the maximum build, $1/3 billion break the bank option, Alternative 4. Alternatives 4's massive cost and complex construction process reflect the difficulty of building a road where nature doesn't want one, where the slopes are unusually steep and where the rocks are waiting to speed downhill at the slightest provocation. We asked Caltrans to select alternative 2. It provides a much needed second evacuation route during wildfire in the San Gabriel Canyons, and it stabilizes the road at the lowest cost and makes it safer for Caltrans workers, which is important. It is also the best option for the bighorn sheep. And I might add here that fences to keep the bighorn sheep off of the route also impair the migration and movement of the bighorn sheep. The closed section of Highway 39 is surrounded very closely by federally protected wilderness areas designed to preserve their solitude and tranquility. Alternative 2 will preserve these characteristics. Alternative 4 won't. Alternative 4 would add more gridlock and air pollution to Highway 39, snarling traffic from downtown Azusa to East Fork on summer weekends, overburdening the already understaffed Forest Service and threatening the public safety with increased crowds. Alternative 4 will harm our efforts to improve conditions at East Fork, pulling already overstretched Forest Service crews away to work in the high country. Given the conditions at East Fork, this would be unconscionable. As a previous speaker mentioned, Highway 2 between at the Islip Saddle area is generally closed during winter. So it's often closed for 4 or 5 months. So you're really building, Alternative 4 really would build access for 5, 6, or 7 months. And if it is open during the winter, it would be much like Mount Baldy, where you have tremendous number of rescues, injuries, and damage. Again, if nature could vote, it would vote behind Alternative 2, the public safety, minimum build, responsible option. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, our next speaker is Ida Ashuri. I'm going to unmute and ask you to speak. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. I'm an attorney and a neighborhood council member, and I wanted to comment against this project and advocate for the no build project. I wasn't able to access EIR, and I also noticed that the links to register for this Zoom were not working. And so I feel like there should be at least one other Zoom event because of the issues, technical issues. And I did alert Caltrans to this. There has been very little outreach. The social media does not have links directly to register to these events, and it needs to do a better job for outreach. I would say that this is not an evacuation route, and I am disappointed Sierra Club advocating for that project, because this is just connecting two roads. This is not an evacuation out of the this region. Any road construction would be incredibly invasive, and it's very disappointing that the Caltrans has summarily stated there's no real wildlife impact, when even in its own presentation it admits that the bighorn sheep are utilizing the same road that they would be constructing. As well, there will be high maintenance costs, as the admitted precariousness of this road with the rock slides would require constant maintenance, and just a big drain on our budgets for a road that really should not be open whatsoever. Also, I still have not heard a very clear reason as to why this road needs to be reopened now, when it's been closed for more than 50 years, and why all of a sudden this need has occurred at this moment. If this would create a standard where we would be reopening roads in Sullivan Canyon or other areas that have been closed and open to just nature. Also, it's a very wrong misinterpretation of what Complete Streets is. Complete Streets is about balancing uses of bikes and motorists. It's not about just creating random access for bikes in the middle of nowhere. Bikes can access this road anyways. Also, this project was based on a wildlife study that was conducted more than 20 years ago. A lot has changed due to climate change, and it's not relevant. And so it's very misleading to make any statements about impacts to wildlife and something that when there's been tremendous changes in the environment since this study has been conducted. Again, this construction itself, it will have a massive impact on wildlife. And then introducing more human interaction with this area will result in more garbage, more wildfires, and a huge negative impact to the environment. And again, we'd like to also know if these comments are being taken as a formality or if Caltrans has an idea already, because it already has a history of just building roads without any real impact or consideration impact of the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ida. Okay, our next speaker is Neil. And Neil, I'm gonna probably not say your last name correctly. It's Mornini?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you pronounce your first and last name for me, please?
Sure. My full name is Neil Moneimne, Mouneimne. And I've been a resident of the foothills for my entire life, more than 50 years, seen a lot of change in that time. My issue is that, and I don't think anyone's quite brought it up, this section of the Angeles Crest, up in the area where SR-39 connects to, is a beautiful alpine area. It's kind of a very unique character in the Angeles forest, and it's very remote. Adding more traffic with passenger cars or passenger car access, I think, would be a tragedy. And you know, it's one of the things about it that's really nice is that when you can get out there, you avoid a lot of the dangerous car traffic that you get lower in the Angeles Forest area. And so it's particularly great for hikers and cyclists who want to manage an escape. So I'm against anything that would substantially increase the traffic, and I think passenger cars is kind of the big thing. Another thing that I wanted to bring up that I think is very important, Caltrans seems to have an apparent policy that when they close roads for cars, they close them for cyclists and hikers as well. And I don't think that makes sense. I think that's very problematic. Alternative 3, I'm really against that. I do want to see access for hikers and cyclists, but I agree with the Sierra Club member that the shuttle to nowhere, I don't think makes sense. I think something like alternative 1 or perhaps alternative 2 makes more sense, with a tweak to just simply allow hikers and cyclists to access the road. It's really that simple. We are used to accessing trails in the Angeles National Forest that are inaccessible to cars. We don't need shuttles for it. And so that's, there's already lots of precedent there. It just requires a slightly different reimagining of alternative 1 or 2, or even possibly, a reimagining of alternative 3 without the shuttle. So that's, and also I would disagree with the previous speaker about that cyclists can already access it. Yes, technically we can physically access the road. We can't do it lawfully. And so what I'm asking for is to at least change the status of the road to allow cyclists and hikers to access the road lawfully. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Charles Hurd. So, Mr. Hurd, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Okay, having a bit of technical problem here. Just a moment. All right, I'm having a problem unmuting. Mr. John Culvert, can you hear me? John?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. And Charles heard, I thought you had your hand raised. If you could raise it again, and I'm so sorry for the glitch there, but we will come back to you if you want to speak. Okay, Mr. Culvert, please go ahead and start.
Yeah, my name is John Culvert, and I've been a longtime resident in Wrightwood, and I'm a commuter. So when the 2 is open, that is typically my commute home. So I see the bighorn sheep, I take that road all the time. Currently, I've never seen a bighorn sheep hit on the road. There's not a lot of traffic up there, since in the summertime is when it's only open typically. My question would be if you could answer in the chat or audio. The 2 has been closed for a long time, and it often is. So when is that going to be open? What's the issues there? And the first speaker had a good point of, well, why are we open this when the 2 has so many problems being open? Like the 2 really needs to be addressed. But a counterpoint is, as a commuter, I would love to see the 39 open as another option. Once again, it's only open for maybe 6-7 months. I assume the 39 would be that same instance. And then looking at the design with the viaducts, that seems like a great solution for travel, wildlife, and the rock slide problems. It is probably expensive to build like that, but in my opinion, good solution, and I'd love to see it open. And if you could please answer my question on the 2, that's all I have.
I'll provide a brief response regarding the 2. There was some storm damage from this past winter that needs to be addressed, and repairs are being planned and will be taken care of. I don't know how soon that will take place, but the short answer is that there was some storm damage, and that is the reason the 2 is not open right now.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. Okay, our next speaker is David Nish. I'm asking you to unmute and begin your comments. Sorry. There we go. Oops. There we go. David?
Hello, my name is David Nish. I've lived in the local area since 1978, the year that Highway 39 was washed out and has been closed ever since. I have also recreated and fought fire throughout the Angeles Forest and Angeles Monument. So I've seen a lot of the changes throughout these years and the impacts of the population increase and recreational activity. In short, it has been a very large blessing that the 39 was washed out in 78, and it has allowed that area to be one of the most remote and locations within the forest. And it is actually been much of a benefit for recreationalists, first responders, forest managers, local wildlife habitat, and residents within adjacent local communities. As far as the opening of the roadway and allowing unrestricted access to emergency personnel, I believe that is in opening it to the alternative 4 access or alternative 3. I believe that is very narrow-sighted. And in regards to that location and why the bighorn sheep are there is because that slope is very steep, inaccessible, straight up and down. And that's why those species have been able to thrive in that area. And that's why it was washed out to begin with. And to spend $250 million and then some, which would be a great higher amount in the long run with additional maintenance that would be required, routine maintenance. There would be additional washouts. We've already seen that with Highway 2. The amount of time that it's been closed over the last 5 or 10 years, I'm sure has been greater than the amount of time that it has been open. And just looking at the results of the East Fork drainage and the difficulty that the forest personnel, emergency responders, law enforcement have in managing that area, it is going to present much greater problems, and they will not have sufficient resources to manage the opening of Highway 39. And to have that as a commuter route, I've seen the commuter route on the Angeles Forest Highway going toward Palmdale, and that would pose very significant problems having that open as a thoroughfare between Azusa and the high desert. The resources are not capable of handling that number of people. And there will be constant trash, graffiti, vandalism, theft, racing vehicles, accidents, and more fires. So it will be much more of a negative impact to emergency personnel and the public and public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker, and I believe I'm calling on you again, Mr. Hurd, and I apologize. I thought we had skipped over you, but go ahead.
Rebecca, I think he
this should be
mentioned.
now working.
Oh, are you, is that you, Charles?
Am I unmuted now? This is, yes,
Yeah.
great. My full name is Charles Michael Hurd. I'm a former resident of the San Gabriel Valley and a former volunteer in the Angeles National Forest. I'd like to express support for Alternative 2 with the modification of allowing pedestrian and bicycle access. Neil stole my thunder on this one, but basically I agree with everything he says about allowing that access. It would solve a lot of problems. And a point that hasn't been made up to now, keeping the status quo is not necessarily going to give the best environmental income. If there is a fire or an emergency, it is very likely that that road will be reopened under emergency conditions with less attention to environmental impacts than would a careful repair that is done in peacetime, so to speak, as Alternative 2 would be. So my what I'm urging Caltrans to do is to consider adopting Alternative 2 with the modification of allowing pedestrian and bicycle access through the route. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, our next speaker is David Jallo. David, asking you to unmute.
Yes, hello. My name is David Hayo. I'm a resident of the Antelope Valley, and I really enjoy the town of Wrightwood. What I like about going up there is not seeing the crime, the graffiti, the noise that you get in other areas. And I think that opening Route 39 will increase traffic, noise, graffiti, and criminal activity up there. And while I do commute like many of you, I have actually chosen not to use the 14 on many. I'm serious and reckless driving of people. I notice that people drive at such high rates of speed that I cannot safely travel on that road. So I understand your concerns there, but I believe that opening 39 will be the cause of many people's deaths. It can result in fires. And I believe those fires could further damage our communities. I've survived the Bobcat fire, and I really don't want to endure another fire. especially caused by reckless people coming up from the city, recreating up in that area, which is so pristine and beautiful, and then causing a fire that could destroy the town of Wrightwood and other surrounding communities. So I think fire is one thing, but just take a drive through what used to be beautiful Azusa Canyon, stop along the roadside, look at the graffiti, the trash, and in some cases, the criminal activity, which makes it not a good place to recreate. So those things need to be considered. And I think that there's a fundamental flaw in the assessment here that says that these options won't have serious impacts. The traffic alone is a big impact on wildlife. The noise from cars, the presence of people, that will deter these Nelson bighorn sheep, but many other species. So I respectfully acknowledge your comments, but I think it's going to be very bad for this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised at the moment. So if there are no other requests to speak, I will officially close the public comment period. Okay, and I will return you back to our presentation. And I will turn the presentation back over to Carl Price. Carl?
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate you being here and providing your comments. And again, we do take your comments seriously. We will consider them, we will address them, provide responses in the final document. And again, want to say thank you very much for providing your comments. And again, on the screen, you can see other ways that you can provide comments. You can mail comments directly to me, or you can provide email comments to the address on the screen. Again, May 11th is the deadline for submitting your comments. So please, that gives you about 3 months or 3 weeks or so to do that. So please provide your comments by that time. And thank you again. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your weekend.